Hello, and welcome to the Watchman's Call, prophetic podcast rooted in Ezekiel 33. In a world asleep at the wall, this space exists to sound the alarm, expose the darkness, and equip believers and seekers alike to see, speak, and stand. I'm your host, James Prosoco, but this isn't about me. It's about the call. The call to confront evil from human trafficking to spiritual decay. The call to protect the vulnerable in our homes, churches, and communities. The call to reclaim reverence, purpose, and truth. If you feel that stirring, that this moment in time demands more than silence, then you're in the right place. Be the watchman. Join the call. This is the Watchman's Call, Episode 2. The sword is coming. There's a moment in every story where someone sees the danger before anybody else, where someone sees the cracks in the wall, the smoke before the fire, the silence before the storm. That person once was called the Watchman. This series, The Watchman's Task, is a call to reclaim that role, not just for religious, not just for the bold, but for anyone who sees the darkness creeping in and refuses to turn away. These first 6 episodes lay that foundation. What it means to stand the watch, what it means to stand the wall in an age of noise, how truth is twisted and the church grows silent, why prayer has been abandoned, and how your story, your voice, your burden might be the very signal someone else needs to hear. You don't have to be perfect to be a watchman. You just have to be willing to stay awake. This is the Watchman's Call. Welcome to the wall. So maybe you're not religious. Maybe you stopped trusting churches altogether. And maybe faith has always felt distant or dangerous. But what I'm about to say is not about religion. It's about a warning. It's about a responsibility. In ancient times, when danger was coming, someone was placed on a wall. They were called watchmen. We know this is true. We see this in the scripture. In Ezekiel 33:7, God speaks directly to the prophet. He says, "Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Whenever you hear a word from my mouth, you shall give them warning from me." Isaiah 62:6 says, "On your walls, O Jerusalem, I have set a watchman, all the day and all the night. They shall never be silent." A biblical worldview teaches us that silence in the face of evil is itself a form of complicity. The role of the watchman wasn't ceremonial. It was a life and death situation, and that role hasn't disappeared. It's just waiting for us to pick it up. His job wasn't to be popular. It was to stay awake, to watch, to warn, to speak when others stayed silent. And that's what the podcast is. Not noise or content, and it's certainly not comfort. It's a warning. Because the sword is coming, and silence has a cost. We live in a world that pretends everything is fine. It numbs the soul with content and comfort and consumption. But look around. According to the CDC in 2023, suicide is the second leading cause of death among individuals ages 10 to 14 and 15 to 24 in the United States. In 2021 alone, over 6,500 youth aged 10 to 24 died by suicide. More teens now report feeling persistently sad or hopeless than any point in the last 30 years. Let's take Emma, a 14-year-old girl from Iowa. And she took her own life after relentless cyberbullying, despite appearing fine on the outside. Her school had no counselor. Her church had no idea she was struggling. Her journal, found after her death, simply read, "I feel invisible. I scream, but no one hears. And M is not alone. Thousands of teens every year write goodbye letters that their parents never see until it's too late. They're not doing it because they want attention. They're doing it because they don't believe anybody is watching or listening. That's why the Watchman is needed, to see the signs, to intervene before silence consumes another voice. The International Labor Organization, the ILO, estimates that human trafficking generates over $150 billion annually in illicit profits. By contrast, Major League Baseball's 2023 revenue was around $11 billion. In 2021, the U.S. Human Trafficking Hotline received over 51,000 signals pointing to 10,000 domestic cases. Victims, often children, and always vulnerable, are out there. And here's what people don't realize. Trafficking doesn't just happen to people in back alleys in foreign countries. It happens in rural truck stops, online chat rooms, suburban homes, and even in our churches. Yes, even in the church. And it's happening in your own state, your own town. That's why we started our nonprofit organization, Our Lady's Haven. We're launching targeted awareness campaigns, training parish volunteers to recognize red flags and develop a crisis response network in partnership with law enforcement and trauma-informed caregivers. We don't just want to talk about trafficking. We want to find the victims, protect them, and walk with them towards healing. You may not know how to fix the entire problem, but you can be the eyes that see, the voice that speaks, and the hands that serve. That's the Watchman's task. Pew Research in 2022 reports that only 63% of the U.S. adults identify as Christians, down from 78% in 2007. Weekly church attendance is below 30%. And for Catholics specifically, a disturbing trend has emerged that fewer than 30% of practicing Catholics believe in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, the very heart of Catholic worship. That isn't a crisis of attendance, it's a crisis of faith, of formation and reverence. We have beautiful churches with empty pews, sacred altars treated like stages, and sacramental mysteries reduced to rituals. Gen Z shows over 40% religiously unaffiliated, and many who remain identify more with spirituality than truth. Gallup reports public confidence in religious institutions is at an all-time low. But listen, the Eucharist hasn't changed. Jesus hasn't changed, has he? But we have. And if the Watchman doesn't sound the alarm within the church, then what hope do we have to be witnesses outside of it? This is not a call to nostalgia. It's a wake-up call. It's time to rekindle the awe, to return to what is holy, to confront the silence. According to the 2022 National Veteran Suicide Prevention Annual Report, approximately 6,392 veterans died by suicide in 2021. That's 17 per day. Now we estimate at 22 per day. 22 veterans a day take their own lives. Veterans are 1.5 times more likely to die by suicide than their civilian counterparts. All this within 3 years of discharge. And I'll be honest with you, I almost became one of them. As a combat veteran, there was nights when the silence was louder than any explosion or gunfire, when the weight of memory, shame, and detachment pressed harder than any enemy ever could. Yeah, I've sat with the bottle. I've sat and stared at a gun and wondered if anyone noticed if I disappeared. But therapy was great. It helped tremendously, but it's not what stopped me. And it wasn't pills. And God bless my family, but it wasn't family. Though I thank God for them every single day. It was the call. The sense that there was still a post I had to guard, that I wasn't done. That the Watchman's task, seeing, speaking, standing, was the very reason I was still breathing. And if you want to know why I started this podcast, why did I start Our Lady's Haven? It's because I made it out of that pit. And I know there's so many others that are still in it. And if you've never battled those demons, be grateful. But don't assume they're not real. And if you have, and you're still here, then maybe, just maybe, you're a watchman too. We are asleep, and the alarm is long overdue. We don't need more influencers. We don't need more people and social agendas telling us what we can't do. We need more people to become watchmen, people who see what others deny, people who risk sounding the alarm. This isn't about being a Christian, by the way, or a conservative, or left or right. This is about courage, conscience, and conviction. And the truth is, you don't need to be ordained to see the smoke. You don't need to have a theology degree to speak up for the vulnerable. You just need to care. Because evil doesn't wait for permission, and it's counting on you to stay quiet. So, I don't care what label you wear. I care whether your soul is awake. Every society, every generation has needed the watchman. People who see danger and say, no more. People who won't cross their arms while children disappear, while truth gets buried, and while justice is twisted. The prophet Jeremiah, known as the weeping prophet, he was ridiculed, imprisoned, and isolated for warning Jerusalem of its coming fall. He said, I did not sit in the company of revelers, but I sat alone because your hand was upon me. Jeremiah 15:17. He was alone, but he wasn't wrong. Consider Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German pastor who stood against Hitler while the church stayed silent and did nothing. He was imprisoned and executed, not because he was safe, but because he was faithful. Or Harriet Tubman, the runaway slave who returned again and again to rescue others from bondage. She wasn't ordained, she wasn't powerful, but she saw evil and acted. And that's the watchman's call. And Christ himself, the ultimate watchman, wept over Jerusalem. What that even you had known of this day, the things that make for peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. Luke 19:41-42. He saw what others ignored, and he was crucified for it. The prophets were hated in their day. So were the reformers. So were the rescuers. But history doesn't remember the silent. It remembers the one who stood when it was costly, who warned when it was unpopular, who stood guard when others ran. So let me ask you, what are you seeing right now that others refuse to look at? What are you burdened by that no one will talk about? Maybe it's abuse in the home. Maybe it's injustice at work. Maybe it's spiritual decay in your parish or community. That may be your call. That may be your post on the wall. We can't all preach, but we can all protect. And we can't all fight in courts, but we can all speak in circles, in classrooms, at the kitchen table. The watchman doesn't need a platform. He needs conviction. The watchman doesn't always wear robes. Sometimes he wears grief. Sometimes she wears trauma, and still she watches. Wherever you are, that's your wall, your family, your school, your business or your church, your community. Evil thrives where no one watches. But when one person stands up and says, no, not here, something shifts. You don't need my permission. You don't need permission to be a watchman. You need awareness and action. So if this message stirs something in you, join the mission. This isn't a one-man mission. We build this wall together. You may not believe in spiritual warfare, but evil believes in you, and it's counting on your silence. The sword is coming, but the wall is not empty. Be the Watchman. Join the call. By supporting the Watchman's Call on Patreon, you help fund the podcast, outreach work, and survivor advocacy work. You'll get early access to episodes, exclusive commentary, and spiritual tools such as the Watchman's Task Devotional and Journal. You'll join a private circle of fellow watchmen standing the wall with courage and conviction. You can visit us at www.patreon.com/The Watchman's Call. We'll be posting the website information soon. Thank you for listening. Be a watchman. Join the call.